Stephen, would you like to tell me about the court of Redonda, which you have channeled or materialised on the walls here? These are fictional people for a fictional government, or
it comes. The backstory of the project began whilst I was living in Brooklyn on my own in a very nice live workspace on the East River, and without TV and distraction, with a very good bookshop down the road. When I came across a writer called Javier Mirias, who I was unfamiliar with, and I began to read. Well, I read a book, and I thought, this is a very strange book because it's almost ordinary, but I was really intrigued by it. And I read others, and I decided to find out a bit about him, and he's actually quite a prominent Spanish writer, and now he's becoming increasingly celebrated, but his career was originally in Spain and the rest of mainland Europe. And I discovered that he had this position called as the King of Redonda, King Javier of Redonda. And Redonda is a lump of useless rock in the middle of the West Indies. And about 1865, in the 1860s, a merchant trader had identified this rock and thought, and realised that no nation had claimed it, so he would have it himself. And he appointed himself the king, and then it's slightly dusty, and I think he goes off on different tracks, but the kingdom was then passed down to his son, who passed it down to, continued to pass it down the line through Galsworthy, and across the decades, it would be presented as a kind of honorary title, but the consistent line of this is that it was for artists or writers principally, but creative people that you could give the king would have to be somebody that made things and responded to things and was not obviously regal. And it ended up in around 2000 being Javier Mirias being asked whether he would like to be the King of Redonda, and he said he would, but on the condition that he could appoint his own court. And so that's what happened, and he has appointed a court of people that he admires, writers and filmmakers. And
has he given them special positions, or
he gives them titles, and then quite fanciful names. I mean, most of these people are people that are, have you would be familiar with. I mean, they include Almodovar and Sebald and Francis Ford Coppola and A.S. Byatt and so forth, and they become the Duke of the Black Dog, I think, in Ian McEwan's case.
Not things like Minister of Justice or
no, they're embroidered elaborate titles, which to spark imagination. So it's a construct. It's an idea of that I was sort of intrigued with, and I wrote to Javier Mirias, and in that correspondence, I suggested that I would paint a court. I'd do the courtly paintings, and I've sat in sort of august rooms over the decades with where they're lined with portraits, kind of university colleges and so forth, and that idea of having, instead of celebrating kind of bastions of those fields, I would celebrate those that made things. I mean, the paintings they're not portraits from life, and they're not depictions of real people. They're people that I have invented and wanted to invent a wide range of sort of motley ne'er-do-wells, and in a way celebrate their ordinariness, because I mean there is that line that I kick around my head which goes, the ordinary is more extraordinary than the extraordinary. So they are the paintings are, I mean, there are 101 of them, and I want to make each of them seductive, or beckon the viewer to come and inquire, come hither.
So it's completely open. People can imagine whatever they like,
and they can put narratives to these people, because I think as soon as you put a figure into a painting, there is a degree of narrative introduced straight away, a degree of wanting to build a backstory and wonder who those people are. But I wanted some of the rules that I set myself out were to avoid making any of the people particularly beautiful. I wanted them to be a diverse range of people that you might meet and weren't kind of head-turningly dashing or spellbindingly beautiful. I mean, I wanted the paintings to do that, but I wanted the people in them to be diverse and regular and
interesting.
Yeah, and
people to spark curiosity.
Yeah, yeah.
And did you set out to paint 101?
When I was in Brooklyn, I'd begun painting what I thought might be the beginning of this project, but I was aware that if I was going to paint them, there would need to be a lot of them for it to make sense, or otherwise it would just be a series of small series of heads. So the size of it was intended. I didn't know that I'd get to 101. I wanted to get over 100, and I also was soon after I'd begun them, I was approached by Casa Dandolo about doing an exhibition here, and that, as I'd just begun thinking about this project at the time that invitation came, it seemed like a synergy and a good clever timing, had it not just been totally fortuitous.
This is a wonderful medieval wall on which to hang.
Yeah.
Pseudo and ancestral portraits, isn't it?
The piece will have another life and be shown elsewhere, and at that point it will probably be formatted in a different order, because it has that flexibility. But in this rather grand palace with a view of the Grand Canal out of the window, it has been hung to suggest a salon that has been here for years and years, and quite a traditional stacking up of paintings.
Was there a utopian undercurrent to your imaginings for this court? Did you imagine that it would be rather wonderful to have an island governed by creative people? There is an element of this which is certainly
a reflection of the times we live in and the country that you and I come from, which seems to be in the process of shrinking back and avoiding participation. That seeming to me to be a regressive and an unconstructive step. You'd have an island ruled by people that wouldn't otherwise be in that position. Kind of has its attractions, and I suspect that the policies would be imaginative and confusing and unpredictable and
possibly quite anarchic.
Possibly quite anarchic, indeed.
But I didn't realise until last year I was reading that actually Venice, despite having been founded on great wealth, and obviously with wealth comes privilege, spent a long time, there were courts that were designed to ensure that people didn't abuse their privileges, that it was a just and equal society that was thriving here. Was that something that was triggered by this?
No. I was aware that, of course, that Venice had this great power, and there are family lines that go back hundreds of years. I mean, the people that the family who reside in this building could trace their line back to the 12th century, according to a conversation I had with them. And in that conversation, they claimed that the family survived for that long because they never chased big ambition. They avoided high politics and kept their head below the parapet when times changed.
But those narratives weren't necessarily playing.
They weren't playing. I mean, these are made in a rugged studio in Hackney in East London, whilst the project was made for this space, I mean, it is a project that, when I began it, I knew needed a big space, but I didn't know what that space would be. So I'm making those, when I'm making the paintings, I'm not making a direct conversation with Venice, but Venice was an appropriate and an opportune place to house it.
I'd like to ask you about something we talked about earlier, where I was saying the influences in your work seem very exotic and Persian perhaps, and you were talking about the fact that you possibly travelled a lot more in your imagination than you have in reality. Can you tell me a little bit about?
Yeah, I know parts of America and parts of Europe, but I am kind of neglectfully, badly travelled, and the line that you can travel the world through the books in your bookshelves, I think has some truth in it. I mean, I guess the decorative punctuation marks that happen in the paintings they feel as though they're invented in my head, but I think they've clearly come from somewhere. I can't always identify where that is.
Given that the project started when you were in New York, or the idea for the project and the reading for it, I'd love to imagine that some of these faces that we see around us might have been sparked by an experience in Chinatown, or
because I mean these have been made over about. They've really been made over about 14 months. There were these 3 or 4 that were made a bit earlier. But the last 14 months, this is what I've been doing, and it's a very strange daily practice of they're painted on wooden panels, and sitting in front of a panel inventing a character. And it's got to the point where I travel round or move around wherever I am, and I identify what have become known as, what I refer to as redundant heads, and they're people with, kind of interesting faces, or distinctive, or perhaps not orthodox, or perhaps not conventionally beautiful, but are quite kind of memorable, and that it becomes it's kind of become a sort of joke between me and the people that are in my studio, when somebody may come and deliver something with our redundant head, and noticeably since this has been up, people come in and they identify that I've seen photographs appearing on Instagram or those types of places of people standing in front of them, and with a kind of familiarity or self-recognition. Certainly the guy at the end with a big beard, the man that lit this show, had a lot of photographs taken. He had a big, serious beard. And
would you like to tell us a bit about the State of the Nation trio that?
That's those are the three big paintings, which one was made 2015. 116, 117, and the first of them was painted on the announcement, following the announcement of the referendum as to whether Britain should remain in the EU, and it was. I mean, it caused me concern when they called the referendum, because I could see that the likelihood was for a leave outcome, and I guess I rather smugly say I called it early. But whilst politics plays a part in how I think about the world, and I think it's a, I think we have the responsibility to have those thoughts. I don't make overtly political paintings, or not obviously at least. But I wanted to, I could see the precariousness of the situation, and that very English habit of England as a secular country not having a history of painting religious paintings that you get, say, in Italy or Spain. They would paint people on horseback, and it's the love affair between the British and their horses. That seemed like a good starting point. And not knowing what the outcome, but being concerned as to what it might be, I thought I would paint one right at the beginning of a rider being vulnerable, and then paint a second one late in the campaign, and then wait to paint the third until the result came. They are three paintings of a rider who may or may not stay on the back of the horse, or certainly the first two of those. And the third, he's definitely off. And the third is sort of landed in the mire. So they're called State of the Nation as a. I think I call them State of the Nation, thinking as a reference to the annual American speech. But somebody did point out to me that's actually called the State of the Union. But that was the intent. It was kind of it was an unobvious way of looking at where we are today, albeit using a motif that could have been from yesterday.
Do you feel there's particular resonance in exhibiting in Venice this year, given?
I think there is, because doing a show and shipping it across Europe, liaising with the shippers and the authorities over here, and that's a hard slog, and it's only going to get, I would imagine, only get harder. So I think I don't know where we will be the next time the Biennale comes around, but things could be more complicated. It will be more complicated to do those things.
It strikes me the curatorial theme, which is very much about art and literature, is very much present in your work here.
If I look back as to what I've been doing over recent years, it is taking an idea and looking at it from a lot of different angles, and a lot of those ideas are complicated and impractical, but something happens, and if my job as an artist is to be curious and to make decisions, it's also, with that, I also want to keep myself engaged and alert and
there's also something about doing something on this scale, though, that demands that degree of time and contemplation.
And I've done things this size before. It seems possible, and the degrees of risk involved, and certainly degrees of impracticality, but it seems kind of nourishing enough to want to go back and do them. I think also that I recognised quite a long time ago that if I tried to be in the right place, I was going to miss the train every time, and certainly it's and I think the point at which I kind of stopped worrying about that and just got on and did what I can't help doing. That was a liberation, and it kind of results in I think work that doesn't really belong anywhere, which I'm quite happy for that to be the case.
Because it's more of a provocation.
It is slightly provocative, but it's also what I am and who I am.
It's a celebration as well.
Yeah, it's a kind of reliance of. I think that we can all. I think what we can't help doing is what's interesting. I think the fermenting of an idea, and we can all start from the same beginning, but how that is processed in one's mind, that's going to make a difference. And then also how it, I mean, as someone who's very much involved in the making of things, and how that idea flows down my arm and appears on a surface. In that, at every stage, that's making something more and more individual. And I think problems arrive when, well, certainly problems for me arrived when I tried to be something that I wasn't. So the point at which I can't work that one out. I do what I can't help doing, and I think that seems to be quite the only way.